everyone. This is Professor DePaulo. Welcome you back to Research in Psychology, Psych 265, fully online. And today we're going to be talking about the results and the discussion section. So if we go into the Assignments tab on the left here, you'll see that the results section has already been posted. So let's click on this. All you have to do is copy and paste this into your final paper. So you're just going to copy and paste this section right after the method section. So these are based on the hypotheses that we tested in our study as a class. And those hypotheses were found in the introduction instructions. So if we just review the introduction, we had 5 hypotheses here. Empathy will be positively correlated with the belief in the effectiveness of the COVID boosters and vaccines in general. That's the first hypothesis. People who plan to take the COVID-19 booster will have higher levels of empathy than those who do not. Second hypothesis. Third hypothesis is health anxiety is positively correlated with fear of side effects from the COVID vaccine and boosters. Fourth hypothesis is that alexithymia will be negatively correlated with the belief in effectiveness of the COVID-19 boosters and vaccines in general. And the last hypothesis is that attachment anxiety will be positively correlated with the desire of family and friends to get the booster, and attachment avoidance will be negatively correlated with desire of family and friends to get the booster. So these were the 5 hypotheses that you were supposed to talk about in your introduction. You were supposed to have one article related to each of these 5 hypotheses. And now we're going to revisit them because we collected the data and I have analyzed the data for you. And I'm going to walk you through the results, what we got based on our limited data. So we had a very small sample because only 15 to 16 people in 2 classes actually took the survey. So the first hypothesis about empathy and effectiveness of the booster: there was no significant correlation between empathy and perceived effectiveness of the COVID-19 booster shot. Here's the correlation data. So I'm writing out the results like I would write them in a journal. R16 is 0.355, P is 0.177. What that means is that this correlation is not significantly different than 0. And the reason why that's the case is because of a low sample size. The correlation is still pretty small, 0.355, although it's not tiny. There's something there, but it's not strong. It's not a strong enough effect to show with such a small sample size. So we didn't support that first hypothesis. Now the second hypothesis about empathy, the results include that there was no statistical difference in empathy between people planning to receive the booster and those not planning to receive the booster. So this was a t-test, and it showed that there's no statistical difference between the group of people that want the booster and a group of people that don't want the booster. But once again, we have a small sample. So it's kind of hard to draw strong conclusions based off of this very small sample. Now the third hypothesis was significant, so was supported, in that health anxiety was strongly correlated with both a fear of long-term negative side effects from the booster as well as fear of long-term negative side effects from the original vaccine. So both were highly significant. So if you're higher in health anxiety, you're afraid of the booster, and you're afraid of the side effects, and you're afraid of the booster, you're afraid of the side effects from the original vaccine as well. So you kind of think, yeah, okay, but do I really want to take it because it hasn't been studied enough? And so you shy away from it. If you're high in health anxiety, that means you're afraid something bad, wrong is going to go with your health all the time. So that was supported, so that's a good thing. Even with a small sample size, it was very strong. 0.682 and 0.692. Very, very strong correlations. The fourth hypothesis, there was no correlation between alexithymia and the belief in the effectiveness of the COVID booster. And so alexithymia is the inability to label and understand emotion. And this is not related at all to the effectiveness of the vaccine. So you could have thought maybe these people were not emotionally involved and therefore maybe or maybe they don't really have an opinion about the booster, but that's not the case at all. So it has nothing to do with regulating emotions, has nothing to do with identifying emotions. People just don't really believe too much in the effectiveness of the COVID booster. Now, the last hypothesis, there was a significant negative correlation between attachment avoidance and the desire of family and friends to get vaccinated against COVID-19. So what does that mean? So that was supported. And this is basically saying that the lower you are on attachment avoidance, the higher you are on the desire for family and friends to be vaccinated. And the higher you are in attachment avoidance, the lower you are in the desire of family and friends to be vaccinated. So attachment avoidance is this kind of construct where you don't form close relationships. You kind of like to be by yourself, and you have intimacy problems. You don't have many close friends or family members, and you just kind of really want to either be on your own or you're afraid of being in relationships. And it seems that if you have a lot of this, you don't have a huge desire for your family and friends to be vaccinated. Now, it could be that people that are high on this attachment avoidance kind of like being by themselves. And the best part about the pandemic for some people was they got to be by themselves. They weren't expected to go visit their friends and family and go out and form relationships. They were expected to stay home and isolate. And as much as that pained most of society, it benefited a small portion of society that kind of wanted to be by themselves. There's many reasons for people to want to be by themselves, but in the case of attachment avoidance, where you're afraid of relationships and you're kind of isolating for that reason, that's not a good reason to be by yourself, because you're afraid of any kind of intimacy or relationship. The COVID gave them kind of a free pass to stay home and basically do nothing, to avoid people. And even though that's pathological, that's kind of what you were asked to do during COVID. And a small segment of the population enjoyed it. They liked COVID because they kind of liked being isolated. I know that sounds strange, but there was a small percentage of the population that really did enjoy COVID because they weren't forced to go out. They weren't forced to try to do things that they normally don't want to do, i.e. be with their friends and their family and form relationships. They can use COVID as kind of a crutch. And so overall, we saw that the third hypothesis was supported about the negative side effects from COVID and health anxiety, and we see that the fifth hypothesis is supported about attachment avoidance and the negative correlation with desire for family and friends to be vaccinated. So those are kind of the two things we're going to focus on in the discussion. So how do we now write? So this is basically written for you. I've written this for you. I've posted it. All you have to do is copy and paste it into your final paper right after the method section. You're going to copy and paste, and you're done. I've done the results because it's statistics, and so I can't expect you to be able to do that. And so I've written that for you. Now the discussion section, which you're going to write for yourself. These are the hypotheses from the introduction. Let's go into assignments, and we're going to find how to write the discussion section. And I want this to be 4 paragraphs. So you're going to put the word discussion, center it, non-bold, non-underline, 12-point font, 1-inch margins, center the word discussion in the header, and then there's going to be 4 paragraphs. In the first paragraph, you're going to restate your hypothesis and whether you supported it or failed to support it. And do not use, talk about the results, but do not use statistical terms. So you don't need to write T or R or all that stuff, right? All that's in the results section. You just need to state the results as a complete sentence. So basically what I want is, since you have 5 hypotheses, you're going to write 1 sentence for each of the 5. So what did you find? Did you support your results? So In the first hypothesis, you failed to support the correlation between empathy and perceived effectiveness of the booster. So you could write something along the lines of the first hypothesis was not supported as there was no correlation between empathy and perceived effectiveness of the booster shot. You don't need to include any of the stats here. You're just going to basically give me 5 sentences or so, 1 sentence per hypothesis, and there's 5 hypotheses, whether you supported or failed to support each of those 5. And we supported the third one, which is health anxiety correlated with the negative side effects from the booster. So that was supported. And the 5th hypothesis about attachment avoidance negatively correlated with desire of family and friends to be vaccinated, that was supported. So we supported 2 out of the 5 hypotheses. But you want to write basically 1 sentence for each of the hypotheses about whether you supported it or not, without any of the stats. That's going to go in your first paragraph, double space it. Second paragraph. How do your findings relate to past research? So these 5 hypotheses and the results we got from them. We rejected the first, rejected the second, supported the third, rejected the fourth, supported the 5th. Were these results similar to past research? Why or why not? So basically go back and find that past research. Maybe it's in your introduction already. Past research about these hypotheses. What do our current results as a class that I just showed you? How do those results relate to past research? Are they similar or are they different? And talk about why they're different, if they are different. So in paragraph 2, you're going to need to cite. You're going to need to paraphrase and cite research. Just like you did in the introduction, you're going to have to do that in paragraph 2. You got to go find studies that either support or don't support our current findings. And there's plenty of those studies out there. So you should be citing those studies in paragraph 2. You have 5 hypotheses. Find 5 studies to cite. And then talk about whether they had the same results that we got, or they got different results. And if they got different results, explain why. And there's a lot of reasons why. Our study is a lot different than the studies out there. So that should be paragraph 2. Make sure you're citing, though, in paragraph 2. If you don't cite, that's not correct. You need to cite the previous research and then talk about whether our results differ or similar to that past research. Paragraph 3. If you fail to support your hypotheses, explain why. So, paragraph 2 is talking about these studies, right, and why they're similar or different. Paragraph 3 is really focusing on why we didn't support our hypotheses. So, hypothesis 1, we didn't support. What was the reason? Same with 2, same with 4. And the big reason here why we failed to support our hypotheses is that we had a very small sample size. Our sample size was 15. That's a really tiny sample size. It's going to be very hard to reject the null hypothesis. It's going to be very hard to find an effect with such a small sample. That's the biggest problem with the study, the biggest limitation. So you want to make sure you state that. Other things that may be limitation, the study was primarily made of people that are from New York. And mostly from New York City, right? If not everybody from New York City. People in New York are different than people in Texas, in Tennessee, in Oklahoma, in California, right? So maybe these things are factors with New Yorkers. They're not so much factors with people in the rest of the country. That's a limitation. We don't have a sample size throughout the United States. We just have a sample from a local sample from New York City, and these are relatively young people too, right? The majority of the sample is younger. So maybe with a different type of sample, we can get different results. But with a very young, predominantly female sample, from New York, we're limited. That's a big limitation. So those are two limitations right there. Sample size, very small. The sample diversity is non-existent. We have mostly New Yorkers and a young female sample. Other limitations include the fact that it was a survey, that you may not be able to accurately assess all these things through a survey, like attitudes. Those are possible limitations. So and you can think of other limitations. Those are just three off the top of my head that made the study more difficult to carry out. Are there problems with internal, external validity? Internal validity is drawing cause and effect conclusions. And so we can't draw cause and effect conclusions here because we're using mainly correlational data, and we're not using random assignment here. So we can't draw cause and effect conclusions. So we can't just say that being high on attachment avoidance causes you to have a low desire for your family and friends to be vaccinated. We can't say anything about causality. We could say it's related to, or it's correlated, but not causal, because we don't have a true experiment here. You can only draw cause and effect conclusions with a true experiment. We have a survey. A survey is not a true experiment. External validity is how well does the sample generalize to the population, and in this case, the sample is mainly young New Yorkers. Is that going to generalize to the entire population of U.S. citizens or people in the U.S.? No. People in the U.S. are going to be a lot different than behavioral research class in BMCC, right? So there's low internal validity here, and there's no internal validity, and there's low external validity, right? And that's important that you actually state that in paragraph 3. So I'm basically telling you what to do. If you just kind of follow my directions, you're going to be on the right track. Paragraph 4, what are the real-world implications of the study? The real-world implications have to do with, our reaction to a pandemic. Are there things we can do better about the pandemic? How we responded, how we failed to respond. And most of the time, it's going to be, how do we get people to take the next time we have a pandemic, it could be much more deadly. Are people going to listen and follow directions and guidance from health professionals? This pandemic, COVID-19, there were a lot of problems with that. Hopefully in the future, there's more, people will more likely follow the suggestions of health providers. How would you address the limitations? Well, that's easy. Get a bigger sample, get a more diverse sample, right? And maybe use more of an experimentation approach rather than just surveys. And there's plenty of other things you can mention here as well. I'm just giving you a sort of a head start. So I want 4 solid paragraphs, not like 1 sentence paragraphs, 4 solid paragraphs. They should have, 3 sentences minimum in each one. I want 4 solid paragraphs for these corresponding to these 4 points I'm making for each paragraph, right? And so double space, 1-inch margins, 4 solid paragraphs. Paragraph 2 should definitely have citations. You should be citing previous research, talking about how it's similar or different than our current research. So those 4 paragraphs for the discussion section, save it as a PDF. I'll put the link up there to upload online on Blackboard. You'll have the link to upload. And the results I walked you through, all you have to do is copy and paste that for the final paper. You don't have to put that in this section. You just put that in the final paper. I've done it for you. And then that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm available. Send me an email, and we can figure it out. But other than that, give me the 4 paragraphs just like I described. Double space it, save it as a PDF, and I'll give you feedback, and then you can make the changes for the final paper. So good luck with that, and if you have any questions, let me know. If not, bye for now. I'll see you next time when we're talking about abstract, title page abstract and references.